In this video, down here in the Nerd Bunker, I'm going to tell you about what they've done to my favorite washes. So I'm coming to you directly from the basement, where I get my hobbying done. This is where I stream on Twitch twice a week. This is where I do all of my painting, and it's where I use and have used for like a decade or more Games Workshop's washes. Now, you've probably heard that a bunch of new contrast paints have come out, which is true. We're not going to talk about those today because there's a lot to unpack there, and this is a preliminary kind of report, and it's preliminary just about the washes, not the contrasts. I'll talk about them in a future video. And in saying it's a preliminary talk about the washes, it's actually a preliminary talk about just 3 washes, and it's my favorite 3 washes. It's the Holy Trinity, Seraphim Sepia, Agrax Earthshade, and Nuln Oil. Now, when they announced that these new contrast paints were coming out, they're adding new colors to the range and all kinds of stuff like that, which I'm all for because I love contrast paints. I use them constantly over Zenithal Prime. If you ever watched on Twitter or Twitch, you've seen it, and I do it all the time. And I also use washes all the time, specifically, again, those 3. I use some of the other shades as well, but predominantly it's just the sepia, the brown, and the black. Those are the 3 that I use. And when they announced that they were doing the contrast, they then announced, oh, and we're adding some new washes, some new colors to the washes too. And I thought, oh, that's great. More is always good. And then they said, we're also reformulating the washes as well. And by reformulating, what I think that they did is they kind of turned them into contrast paints. Now, I'm not a scientist. I've mentioned that a bunch of times here on the channel before. But just using these washes for like the last week or so, I've been noticing that they handle a lot like contrast paints. And I'll touch on that point a little bit more. But one of the things, not even with handling, but just looking at them in the bottle, is that if they sit, not all of them, but some of them, if they sit long enough, they will settle like many different colors from contrast do. If you've ever picked up Dark Angel Green contrast, or if you've picked up Ultramarine Blue contrast, and they've been sitting for like a couple of weeks or whatever, you have this thick layer of sediment that you really have to shake the hell out of to get them to break up. And I found a couple of colors doing that already in the shades. Now, these are shades. These are transparent, very thin colors in general, but the fact is that there's contrast-style sediment in some of them, and that leads me to believe that they're using some of the chemistry from contrast in this new reformulation of the washes. And we're seeing it, not so much the sediment part, but some of the other parts of contrast in the Holy Trinity, the sepia, the brown, and the black. So what I'm talking about is in these new ones, we've got this is the older big bottle here, and this is the newer small bottle. You can see the difference, which people have already talked about a bunch online. Spoiler alert, this is an 18 milliliter bottle of the new stuff and a 24 milliliter bottle of the old stuff, and they're the same price now. So just, keep that in mind. But this new stuff, in my mind, it's a lot gummier. When you put it actually onto the model, it is a lot gummier. It does not flow like the old stuff does. The old stuff had a lot of capillary action where it would spread into the recesses very quickly, and sometimes could get away from you, admittedly, depending on what you were painting. But the new stuff, I feel like it's a lot thicker. I feel like your brush sticks to it a little bit more as you're running it over the surface. So what I wanted to do was to do a couple of different things. Number one, I wanted to test the colors of the new paints, the new washes versus the old washes to see if the colors changed in the formulation. And I started with a piece of paper towel. So when you're testing colors of any kind of transparent paints, whether it's contrast, it's washes, it's glazes, any kind of thing like that, if you want to really start to sit down and look at them, you've got 2 colors that are pretty close in the bottle. You look at them and they look pretty much the same, but you want to see what they really do. You get yourself a piece of white paper towel, and then you draw a line of each color onto the white paper towel, and you let it dry, which is what I did with, again, the Holy Trinity. And then I ended up with this piece of paper towel. Now, we've got the new one on one side and the old one on the other side. And honestly, they're very close. There's just the slightest bit of a hue shift between each one. I would say that this one's got a little bit more red in it, or maybe a little bit more brown. It's hard to say. They're so slight that honestly, probably comparing two of the old bottles to each other, you would probably get the same kind of variation. The changes in lot between these are, when you are working with an old bottle of wash and then with the same formulation, a new bottle of wash, the colors will still shift. Sometimes it's just oxidization, how long you've had it around. Sometimes it's just, the ingredients change as they work on it. So sitting down and using something like this to really see the difference, I think works quite well. And honestly, it's very little difference. So that's a benefit. That's a good thing in that the hue did not change very much. How it sits on the model, however, is a different story. So I decided that a torture test was in order. What I did was I took some Space Marines, Jump Pack Space Marines, old ones, TAC Marines, and I primed them white using some Monument Pro Acryl white primer, which in my opinion is the best primer out there. For white specifically, I use it all the time when I'm doing zenithal and stuff like that. But I just didn't do a zenithal. I went just straight white, completely covered the model, and then I painted half the model with the old color and half the model with the new color. And after I let it dry, like for a good a long time, I let it dry for probably about 4 or 5 hours, not just like, 20 minutes, and then I started shooting. One thing I noticed is that the new washes also take longer to dry than the old washes, so that's something to keep track of as well. But basically, kind of here are the results. So we've got, this is the new stuff. This is the old stuff on this side. The left side is the old stuff here. So what we've got is a little bit more splotchiness, in my opinion. If you look at the difference, it does stain a little bit less in the flat areas. One of the reasons I went with a Space Marine is because you have more flat areas. If this was on something that was furry or scaly or had a lot of detail like that, you wouldn't notice this as much. But in flat areas like the side of this thruster here or on the shoulder pad, you definitely get a little bit more splotchiness, I think, with the new stuff than you do with the old stuff. Maybe a little bit of coffee staining and stuff like that. But I think the shoulder pads turned out better on every single one of these with the older wash, at least in my opinion. There's not a huge difference here, but you do see some difference anyway. And I just basically went straight down each side and I just split them in half. And you don't see a huge difference, but it is there a little bit with, I think, like I said, a little bit more splotchiness. But I would say that the old Nuln Oil does do a little bit more staining. And again, we're on a matte surface here. I did not gloss coat this guy or anything along these lines. But as I was painting it on there, it definitely flowed into the crevices and the vents and the places and stuff like that a lot quicker with the old stuff than it does with the new stuff. Then we've got one of my favorites, Agrax Earthshade. Now, in this one, and this is very interesting, it seems as if the newer Agrax Earthshade, besides being frankly a little bit more goopy, a little bit more gloppy, and collecting in a lot of flat areas, it also seems to stain just a little bit more than the old stuff does. Not only does the shoulder pad, I think, look better, and the side of the thruster look better with the older brown wash, but not only that, but I think it actually stains a little bit less. It's not much, but it is a little bit less. It ran a lot better, I thought, into the teeth on this thing. There's spots where this stuff worked well, but any bigger area, it definitely started to cause some trouble, and that was kind of a problem. And again, like I said, the newer stuff to me feels gummier on the surface as I'm painting it. It's not nearly as fluid as the old stuff. And I don't know if that's what helps or actually causes, maybe not helps, but if that's what causes some of the glops and some of the collection areas. And you can kind of go back and try to move things around, obviously, while it's still going, but sometimes it works and sometimes not so much. The biggest surprise, in my opinion, was the Seraphim Sepia. Look how much lighter the new Seraphim Sepia looks than the old Seraphim Sepia. Again, same brush on the same, models. We're all primed at the same time, but you can just see that line like right down the middle. It's actually quite surprising. So in my opinion, the Seraphim Sepia, though, I would say the gloppiness is maybe a little bit almost the same. I would say that the Seraphim Sepia is actually a little bit better if you're looking on it to not stain as much. But very frequently when I'm using Seraphim Sepia, I'm trying to make a blade rusty. I'm trying to make something look weathered, and I'm stippling and I'm splotching and doing stuff like that. And having something that stains a little bit more is actually, for my paint flow, something that actually works a little bit better. And I think that that's going to be the very interesting thing about these new paints. In the grand scheme of things, I am probably going to be sticking with the old washes, at least with this holy trinity, the sepia, the brown, and the black. I can't think of a model that I've painted in the last 5 years that has probably not had, well, I'm sure there's not a model that's not had at least one of those colors on them, but there's probably been plenty of models, most of the models, that have had all three of those colors on them. And for these new formulations to be, again, color-wise, pretty much dead on for the most part, but coverage and flow and movement and things like that, quite a bit different. I think it's going to be a long time until I prefer the new ones to the old ones. I went out to a couple of my local stores and I bought a bunch of bottles of the old stuff. So I've got a decent amount to hold on for hopefully a good amount of time. Maybe they will do another reformulation by the time that I actually run out of the old stuff. We'll see. But I want to test some of the other colors and things like that I don't have a comparison to, because they've added a lot of new things to the shade line as well. I'll be making that video, I think, pretty soon. But all told, if you paint where you only put the wash into certain areas to shade and darken them and things like that, these new washes might actually work pretty well for you. If you are a painter like me, who has a tendency to slop it on a lot of places because I'm trying to get stuff done for Tabletop, your paint workflow might be in a situation where you are used to the amount of staining that happens to the model, and you may not like how things have changed with the new formulation. So it's kind of up to the way that you paint. This is just my opinion. I don't necessarily see myself using the new ones to replace the old ones. I see some of the colors, specifically that Seraphim Sepia, I see me using that as basically kind of a lighter version of regular Seraphim Sepia, but I'm still going to keep using the Seraphim Sepia, to do a lot of weathering and like to make rusty blades and things like that. But there's other times where the actual kind of new lighter color of sepia almost might actually work pretty well. So I hope this was useful. Again, like I said, this is preliminary testing. This is me working on a just straight white model, which I almost never paint something directly over white. I want to start doing a little bit more work on actual real world stuff and being able to compare with like a black and white zenithal or some other kind of zenithal highlight over another color, and then see what happens by using some of the new stuff in comparison to the old stuff. But just at least by my preliminary results, I definitely am not getting rid of the old stuff anytime soon. And like I said, I actually bought more. So let me know in the comments down below what you think. And if you've got any other kind of questions about the washes and things like that, again, like I said, I'm going to do a video in the future, probably a good deal in the future, about the contrast, because I really want to be able to dig into them, because it really seems with the new contrasts that there are 3 different styles of contrasts. And so I want to do a video about that. If you're interested in that, again, let me know about that as well. If you get the chance, I hope that this was helpful. If it was, hit the like button. It really helps out the channel. And if you want to find out more as I talk about more of these new paints, subscribe. Thanks for watching.